Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently shared her thoughts on Joe Biden and the upcoming primary race in a piece by David Freelander in New York Mag. So I'll link to the full piece below the video. It's worth a read. There's a lot in there, but I want to share a few paragraphs from this. So let me start here. Her main project going forward may be this: harnessing her immense star power and the legion of young lefties who see her as their avatar, not just to push the Democratic Party away from an obsession with its most moderate members, but also to make the stuff of government, like congressional committee hearings and neighborhood town halls, into must-see TV. She said the Congressional Progressive Caucus should start kicking people out if they stray too far from the party line. Other caucuses within the Democratic Party in Congress require applications, Ocasio-Cortez pointed out. But they let anybody who the cat dragged in call themselves a progressive. There's no standard, she said. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is exactly right here. When it comes to the Democratic, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, you look at the list of Democrats that are part of the Progressive Caucus, you're going to ask yourself, really? Considering the vast majority of these people in the Progressive Caucus aren't fighting for issues like Medicare for all, or for free public college, or for the Green New Deal, at least in the sense of AOC's Green New Deal or Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal, then what actually is progressive? And this actually goes to a larger issue with labels in general. A lot of voters, so putting the Democratic Party politicians aside for a second, a lot of voters misidentify themselves. So you often see polling, usually from Gallup or other places, where it's people self-identifying as moderate, conservative, or liberal. Now, already, inherently, there's an issue with those labels because it treats liberal, like I wouldn't call myself a liberal, but conservatives who are uninformed on left-wing politics may think I'm a liberal. But liberal is actually the center, is actually moderate. Liberal to me is neoliberal. So I wouldn't call myself a liberal. But again, polling like that goes out and people think, oh, well, I'm not liberal, I'm conservative. But they may be conservative on cultural issues, but they actually support policies like Medicare for all, or free public college, or dealing with climate change seriously. But they identify as conservative, so then politicians see that and think, oh, the American public are largely moderate or conservative. Well, I guess that means my politics have to be moderate or conservative. But then that means those politics of that politician are pro-corporate. But that isn't what the American people want, or consider, or that isn't what the American people consider to be conservative when they call themselves conservative. Now, some, yes, do think that. But again, this is the issue with labels. There is no perfect breakdown of what each label means and where you fall under. So labels are largely useless, which is why you actually have to lead with policy. And that is how you create this sort of, that's how AOC has created this entire movement, not even just around her, but these Justice Democrats in Congress and Bernie Sanders. They have attached themselves to specific policy proposals. And that's what people now recognize as, oh, that's progressive, or that's left wing, or forget those kind of labels. These are policies that are for the people, and these politicians are for the people. Now, moving on to her thoughts on Joe Biden here. This is probably the nicest way that AOC could phrase this. But here it says, I asked her what she thought her role would be as a member of Congress during, for instance, a Joe Biden presidency. Quote, oh, God, she said with a groan. Quote, in any other country, Joe Biden and I would not be in the same party. But in America, we are. This is so true. Joe Biden, if he were in Canada, at best, so we have three major parties here, the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the NDP. At best, Joe Biden would be a liberal. But you can make an argument to say Joe Biden would be a conservative here in Canada. And again, we have no party here that is arguing for a for-profit healthcare system. So if you're looking at the issue of, say just healthcare, then Joe Biden is to the right of the Conservative Party in Canada. And AOC, you could argue she is more left-wing than the NDP here. So if these two politicians in America are almost completely outside the three major parties in Canada, but one to the very left and one to the very right. So she's exactly right here in saying that Joe Biden and her would not be in the same party, which makes it even, I mean, I don't want to imagine a scenario where Joe Biden's the nominee, but it really makes it tough on politicians like AOC and voters in general to argue to vote for Joe Biden if he were the nominee, because their view on politics, their view on how, the American government should operate would be so out of line with what Joe Biden is representing that it would be incredibly tough for AOC to make the case to vote for Joe Biden. The only argument would be you want to vote against Trump. And I think that's a legitimate argument. I mean, if it gets to that point, Donald Trump is such a destructive force that it would be, I think, unfortunately, it would be the only option at that point is to vote for Joe Biden. But understanding as well what led to Donald Trump is a presidency that would be very much like Joe Biden, because it was a presidency that Joe Biden was a part of. So you can't have a scenario where you have a Democratic nominee that puts you into the same position that led to Donald Trump. And it's not just Obama, but in terms of Democratic presidents and Democratic leadership in general over the past 30 years, that has continued to give in to corporate interests and ignore the American people. If you have a Democratic Party that continues like that, that continues the sort of leadership like you see under Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, you're just going to lead to another Donald Trump-like figure in the future 4 years later. So, yeah, it would be very hard for AOC or anybody to make the argument for Joe Biden, which is why the argument would have to be don't vote for Trump, vote against Trump in that scenario. But I don't think we're going to get there. Just to insert my own thoughts on that for a second. I don't think Joe Biden's going to be the nominee, so I'm not worrying too much about this right now. But I'm glad that AOC is feeling a little more open to acknowledging how different her and Joe Biden are. I just want to go on here as she continues. This whole primary, she went on, referring to the one Biden and Bernie are in, is going to be about the soul of the Democratic Party. I think it's a referendum on whether we think everything was fine before Trump. People who live in a lot of privilege, who think of public programs as charity, they often think there was nothing wrong before Trump. They think Hillary was the problem, but it's much deeper than that. Yeah, which is why I say all the time, you can't expect, the idea that Joe Biden is the most electable when he's using the same strategy Hillary Clinton did of reaching out to conservative voters are going to vote for Trump regardless. You have to reach out to people that don't normally vote, young people, independents, typical non-voters, people that are disillusioned by this two-party system. Bernie Sanders, his strength is with the young people, independents, typical non-voter. That's who you need to get out to vote. The people that voted against Trump and voted for Hillary in 2016 are going to come out regardless in 2020. So the people you have to reach are the people that did not vote last time. And you don't do that with the same kind of candidate in Joe Biden that you put up in 2016. You do that with a different vision with Bernie Sanders. Let me go on here. Ocasio-Cortez told me how much she admires Bernie Sanders. She was, by her own estimation, a scrub on his 2016 campaign, going door to door in the South Bronx. Year after year, he was willing to be the lone vote on issues that matter to him, withstanding the pressures to play along with the rest of the team on healthcare, on taxes, on wages. Eventually, the party caught up with him. Every senator running for president except Amy Klobuchar has signed on to his Medicare for All bill. The party is debating a wealth tax, something floated by Ocasio-Cortez on 60 Minutes last year and now pushed by both Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So, some of this is obvious if you follow AOC enough and you understand how she got to where she is today. She worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign, pushing to get him elected. Clearly, she sees herself in that wing of the party, in the wing that really is emerging. And you look at any freaking poll. It's young people are completely with Bernie Sanders and AOC. That is the future of the party. So Democrats that are fighting that, including Democratic voters that are fighting that, you're fighting that at your own peril. You need to get these people out to vote. If you care about getting rid of Trump, you need to be able to excite people that don't normally vote. And that isn't with Joe Biden, obviously. That's with Bernie Sanders.